Mark Weitzel, Principal Architect in Microsoft's Developer Division. Today I'm going to show you the Azure Developer CLI, a new tool we're working to help take you from code to cloud as fast as possible. So let's get started. Your developer journey to Azure can sometimes be overwhelming. I certainly experienced this myself when I joined Microsoft a year ago. While I was familiar with cloud, many of the new concepts and services that Azure presents were different. And so I had to learn those. And this journey, going from understanding a concept of what services to use or how I configure those services to get my code running, it took a lot of time. And so as we stepped back and started to look at that, these were things that we wanted to go off and solve. We wanted to make it easy for a developer to come across some code, to be able to leverage that code quickly, to be able to get up their CI/CD pipeline up and running fast, and to have some confidence that the code that they've just deployed is working. And that's through some observability and monitoring. So when we stepped back and look at this, this is what the challenge that we're trying to solve. Really make it easy for a developer to get to the code, get to the cloud fast. And so we want to do that by simplifying the overall experience that a developer has. If you think about some of the examples you come across today, there's lots and lots of steps in those in the documentation, and you're sort of left at the end with a stopping point. You kind of hit like a wall of what do I do next? And so what we'd like to do is really make it easy for you to get in a complete example up and running fast with a single command, and to configure your CI/CD pipeline and your GitHub actions with a single command. And that's AZD pipeline config, and then to have that degree of confidence that your application is running effectively through that observability. We want to do this in a way that's repeatable, following the best practices of infrastructure as code, and really expose the complexity of cloud and your configurations when you need to do it, when you need to know it. And so you're not hit up front with a lot of concepts you have to sort of understand. So again, going from code to cloud very fast in a very simple, straightforward mechanism following best practices. And to do that, we think there are 4 elements that we need to look at. The first is we want to provide tooling through a developer CLI that is very, very easy to use with a small set of actions that you can take from the command line. Every developer has a CLI. It's sort of the lowest common denominator, so we're going to meet you where you work. We're going to provide a set of templates, and those templates are going to be full application solutions that have not only the application code as an example, but the infrastructure that's going to be provisioned in Azure. They're going to have pipelines that you can easily and quickly set up for GitHub actions, and it's going to have observability in it, so you have that degree of confidence that everything is up and running smoothly. We're going to do this, we're going to build these templates that are following a set of conventions and defaults so that you can quickly plug those things in yourself and tailor that environment and tailor that template for your need. And we're going to complement our existing tool portfolio with these. So the CLI that we're going to build is going to be the engine that drives a lot of our VS Code and Visual Studio integrations as well. We'll take a deep dive into each of these now. So let's look at the developer CLI. This is the core engine that we have inside of the tooling that we're building right now. And you can think of this as a complement to the Azure CLI. So if you think about the things that you do in the Azure CLI, those are very operations oriented. I create resource groups. I set and manage my account and my subscription, or I create a Cosmos database. All of those are a set of commands that I need to do. From a developer perspective, we really want to make it very simple. So if you want to provision resources on Azure, we just want to say AZD provision. We want to make that repeatable in a consistent way. And so we'll leverage infrastructure as code underneath. And so we can tighten up that, write some code, commit the code, push it up to GitHub, and it automatically deploys through your pipeline actions. We want to tighten that loop and make it as quickly as possible. And by doing this, and by having a simple set of commands at the command line, we can have now a very consistent experience across our documentation, our samples, our templates, all of the things that we have that to get you started very, very quickly. I've talked a number of times about templates, so let's take a look at one of these templates now. So we've worked with some of our field teams to understand the common patterns that we see in the industry. So for example, a JavaScript front end, a JavaScript API, and a Cosmos database. So one of the things that you have also is you need to secure that. So we have Key Vault. And again, I've talked about getting that degree of confidence to know the application is up and running. So we have App Insights. This is an architecture that is similar to what you're going to be building when you're building web apps. So it's a real architecture that you have. It's not just a sample application with a set of steps. In addition, because you're deploying real assets to Azure, we want to be upfront about the cost. So we talk about the cost and the pricing calculator and give you an estimate of what that is. And of course, because you're provisioning applications, resources, make it easy to clean those up as well. So this is the kind of template that we have, and it's an opinionated approach to get you started. But it's just that, it gets you started. And we want to make sure that it's easy for you to go in and tailor that to your needs. And it's very straightforward for you to understand where to extend the template for your environment. And as I said before, this is a full solution. It's a full architecture based on the common patterns that we've seen in the industry. And I've talked about conventions and extensibility. And one of the things, if we look at, for example, our infrastructure as code, we expect things in a certain place. We expect a structure in a certain way. In this case, we expect a infra folder that will hold our infrastructure as code assets. In this case, it's Bicep, but we're going to have Terraform support later on down the road. The main entry point is this main.bicep file. And when I talk about creating this extensible framework or this configurable CLI, if you drop in your own main.bicep file, then the developer CLI will just work. And you can think of it in this way as an orchestrator, where it's going to pull together the different tools that you use in your environment. So again, following a set of conventions, having templates with smart defaults creates a framework that you can go in and tailor very easily and quickly to your needs. And the last is our VS Code integration. What we've done is taken that same CLI and we've made it the heart of VS Code extension. And you can see the same developer commands inside of VS Code. Provision for getting resources done, created in Azure, deploy to get code up in Azure. What's exciting about this is because we have the same engine that we use at the command line, that we use inside CI/CD in our pipelines and our GitHub Actions, and inside of the tooling. If you structure your project in the same way, if you follow those conventions, all of these things will just work. And because we're leveraging this, kind of across the board, it's going to be context aware. I don't know about you, but I often start inside of the command line and then I'll hop into VS Code. And it's nice when those things just sort of follow each other, if you will. The other advantage that we have with this is that your inner loop development, that sort of local development, is a very, very tight cycle. And when we leverage things like Bicep to do the provisioning, we can actually configure all of the service principals, the RBAC, all of that for you. And we'll see that shortly. So let's take a look. I'm going to demo a couple of things now. We're going to start inside a template. I'm going to show the CLI. I'm going to show our VS Code extension. And then we'll talk about how you can follow these conventions and create your own template and your own solution using the developer CLI. All right, so let's jump in there. Now, this is typically one of the places that you'll start as a developer. You'll end up doing a Google search and landing on an example that we have here. And so this is a Node.js and Mongo web app. And you can see there's a lot of steps that you have to do. And we talked about that before, step and step and step. And this will get you up and running and we'll get your resources on Azure. and we'll get code deployed, but you're sort of left at the end. You can't recreate that. It's hard to figure out how I now script that or put that into a GitHub action so it's repeatable. And so now let's imagine that this is a template that is structured following the conventions of the developer CLI. And you can see that what we have here is a nice set of code. And here we talked about the infrastructure folder. We talked about the source folder where the code will be. And we have a nice architecture diagram that explains exactly what's going to happen when you do the deploy. And we make it very easy to get this application, in this case it's a to-do application, up and running easy. You've got some prerequisites like normal that you have to install, GitHub and the CLI and Node, because this is a Node example. But you can imagine that now I can simply execute this AZD command, AZD up command, and pass in this template. And what will happen is the developer CLI, AZD, will look at those bicep files and will create an environment and then provision those resources. And when that command gets invoked, I'll be asked for an environment name. I'll be asked for a region and what subscription I want to use. And as soon as that command gets invoked, we'll have a link to the portal where we can track those deployments. And when it finishes, we'll have URLs that print out for both the front end and the API that we have. So let's take a look at those now. Because the deployment, the provision takes a few minutes, I've already created that now. So I'll look at this right here, this MDW.js build resource group. Notice that the resource group name matches my environment name. And you can see here, these are the resources that were provisioned inside of Azure for me. So here's the Cosmos DB and the Key Vault, the Insights dashboard, and our two applications that we have right here that were printed out on the command line. And if we go and look at one of these, we can see that this is in fact running on Azure. It's a to-do application. And I can do things like build demo. Got that. So now I've created a to-do item in the application that I was able to spin up and provision very quickly with one simple command, AZD up. So let's take a look at the other commands that we have inside of our developer CLI. So you can see there's a number of commands, and again, we're trying to be very consistent so that these commands will work across a number of hosts. So not just web apps that we have, but also container apps and functions. So we're really focusing on that consistency across here. So when you do a deploy, we're smart enough to know that it's going to be a web app deploy versus functions or container apps. And we'll show how that works in a little bit when we get into the Azure YAML file that ties all of these things together. I talked a minute about environments, where we can manage multiple environments for you. And then the infrastructure command that allows us to do all of the infrastructure provisioning on Azure. And again, you can see the provision command and pipeline command that we have, and the monitor command. And what up does is up is a shortcut that wraps our provision and deploy commands. So now let's take a look at the monitor command. So I've created an application, I've done AZD up, and now I want to see if that is in fact working. So I will do AZD monitor. When I execute the AZD monitor command, I'll be taken to the App Insights dashboard that comes along with the template. And that's completely configurable by you. So you can create your own dashboard that you deploy when the application gets provisioned. So let's execute that command. And we'll see here that we'll be taken to our App Insights. So this takes us to live metrics, and you'll see here that the live metrics are going to connect here and will be presented with that dashboard. And as soon as we're presented with that dashboard, we'll start to see the default layout that we have. And so I'm going to go off and add another item here. So I want to build the container apps template. And when I drop back over here, you can see that I am getting telemetry from the application. So this is completely hooked up. It's ready to go out of the box. So I've got a high degree of confidence that everything from the front end to the back end is working properly because I can see that. If I want to see the topology, I can, of course, just click over here and take a look at my application topology as well. So again, giving you a full set of code and the template and the monitoring right off the bat. So now I've got a template. I've provisioned that template to Azure. Now I'm about ready to go off and start making that my own and tailoring the code and customizing it. But I know when I do that, one of the things I'm going to want to have is a pipeline set up and a repository so I can track my changes. So I notice up here that we've got the AZD pipeline command, and this allows me to set up a repository and the GitHub actions. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now, so I'm ready to do some local development. So AZD pipeline config. When I execute this command from the command line, it's going to recognize that I don't have a Git repository because I just did a very quick AZD up. So it's going to ask me if I want to create one. I do. And again, it's going to recognize I don't have a remote, so I'm going to create that. And I'm going to create a private GitHub repository as well. And I'll just name it the same. And when I do that, it's going to create everything that I need for creating that code and getting those GitHub actions up and running. So it's going to create the service principal for me. It's going to set up all the secrets that I need. And I'll show you those right now. So I'm going to go ahead and push the changes here. And then I'll hop over and take a look at the repository. So here are the actions that we have. And you can see that this is up and running and has been pushed here. And we can jump into that and take a look at it. And that's the action that's going to run every time that I go off and do a push to main. And what's exciting about this, as we mentioned before, is it's the exact same commands that we used at the command line for provision, for deploy. It's the exact same commands that we'll use inside of our VS Code tooling, exact same commands inside of our GitHub action. So very consistent approach across the board that's repeatable for you as a developer. And again, since I've created this repository, it's just done a push. So I'm ready to start making this template my own. Okay, so to do that, I'm going to go into VS Code. So now I'm in VS Code, and I'm ready to do some local development. First, let's get ourselves oriented to where we are inside of the project and inside of the template. You can see that we've got a source folder that has both our API definition in it and our web definition. So these are the two projects that constitute our application, our web front end and our API. We talked before about our infrastructure folder, and this is where we can, this is what the provision command uses to actually create the resources inside of Azure. The main.bicep is our main entry point into that folder. And so this is the entry point that AZDev provision looks at. And we use two additional files as well. The parameters file, which matches our environment and our location and our principal ID, the same things that we created when we initially spun up the template with the AZD up command. We established those environment variables, environment name, the location, and the principal ID. And here is where our resources are defined. So this is the resource file in Bicep, and it's these resource definitions that will actually be created in Azure. And so you can see we've got one for our website, our API. So this is the one for the API. And up here we have one for the web as well. So these definitions give you that repeatability that you have when you create your resources in Azure. When you use the infrastructure as code in your pipeline, it's these bicep files that will be provisioned. So how do we tie all of that together? So the way that we tie that all together is through the azure.yaml file. And in the azure.yaml file, you can see that we use the same set of conventions and the same names. So we have our Azure environment name with web, and we say, here is where that application lives. So in the source folder, underneath that, we have web. So this folder right here is this service that we declare inside of the azure.yaml file. We also say that it's a JavaScript file and that it's going to be deployed in app service. Our goal is that you can change the host, say make that a static web app, and nothing else will have to change. So we give you a high degree of configurability when you're leveraging the templates. And you can see here's our API. So again, environment name and API. Where's the source? That's our folder right here, our API folder. And again, it's JavaScript deployed on app service. So that's how we tie everything together. It becomes a very straightforward set of conventions that you can start to follow to describe your application to make it work with the Azure Developer CLI. So now I can do some local development very quickly and very easily. I can tie into the run and debug here, but we also have a set of tasks that we can use as well. So I'll run a task and I'll start both of them locally. So you can see that I've started up the API, the front end and the back end. And what this will do is start those applications and allow me to interact with them locally. So here we go. This is on port 3000. Let's open that up. And you can see I did a refresh because our backend wasn't completely spun up, but you can see that we've actually connected to the Cosmos database that we've already provisioned in Azure. So that use of our infrastructure as code, as our bicep, when we run that, all of those service principals, all of the credentials, all of the RBAC is set up for you right out of the gate. So it's very simple for you to connect to those Azure resources and start building locally. You can see I've got local host, so I'll add another item here. Build SWA template. And now I'm essentially doing my inner loop development. So I can do things like over here, I want to tailor this a little bit for me. So let's go just change something very quickly. Let's look at our layout. Here's our header that we've got right here. And I just want to make this my own. So this is the build demo to do. And so when I save that, you'll see that this will refresh here. There it is. And now I've just done some very quick local development. I've tested it out. Now I want to push that up to GitHub, have those GitHub actions that we provisioned before kick off and run, and move that code into Azure. So let's do that now. And I'll sync the changes as well. And now that'll push that code up to our GitHub repository here. Let's go look at our actions. And this will kick off here momentarily. There we go. So now what I've done is completed that inner loop development. I've gone from my local environment completely set up for me out of the box by just starting up a local code environment in VS Code. I've made some changes. I've pushed those changes to the repository that was already set up for me through the pipeline config command. The GitHub actions that were set up as well are kicked off. And now we're building and deploying that code directly to Azure. All very simple, all with one single command. and it's the same command that is used under the covers, whether you're working from the CLI, inside the action itself, or through the VS Code extension. Great, so that's now kicking off, and that's going to build and deploy our code. And at this point, one of the things you might be thinking is, how do I start leveraging the Azure Developer CLI myself? How can I take advantage of it? And so what I'm going to show you right now is the steps that you can create, that you can follow to leverage your template, to leverage the Developer CLI for your own template. So to do that, let's see, we will open up two VS Code instances. So this one is what we might end up with when we're done walking through an example. So you can see that I just have the code and not much else that I have. I don't have any way infrastructure as code assets. I have no way to really run that or deploy that. So let's look at our finished template that we have. So here's another one of our templates. And you can see that we have the same sets of structures in here. We have our infrastructure as code. We have our Azure environment that we have there that gets created for us when we up the project. And we have our VS Code folder as well and our GitHub Actions. So if we want to leverage the Azure Developer CLI inside of our environment, it's really straightforward. The first thing that we need is our infrastructure as code, or our infra folder. So I'll just take that and drag it over. And so now I have an infrastructure as code folder. And of course, I'll have to tailor this to my environment. We might not have the same sets of resources to deploy, but this gives you a building block that you can quickly and easily leverage and tailor. The next thing that we'll need to go off and copy over from our environment is our azure.yaml file. So I'll copy that over here. And again, our azure.yaml file is what ties us all together. And again, you're likely going to have to tailor this for your own environment and your own entry points, because you're likely not going to have an API and web structure like that. So now we've got our source code, we've got our infrastructure as code assets there, and we have our Azure YAML. And that's the core of what you need to go off and create your own template to leverage with the Azure Developer CLI. You can see that it's very straightforward and that we make it easy for you to plug into this framework. So I hope that you've enjoyed this presentation and that you've got a quick, quick look at some of the things that we're producing to make it easy for you to go from code to cloud very, very quickly. I'd like to invite you to our private preview. You can see the registration link there, aka.ms/azd sign up. And once you're enrolled, we'd love to hear some feedback on the solution templates. We'd love to understand if you've been able to take the Developer CLI and use it with your own template that you've created from one of your projects. And this is all going to be open source. We're in private preview right now, but we'd love for you to get involved. We'd love to hear your feedback. And we've got our discussions and announcements in the repository there. Well, that's the first look at the Azure Developer CLI. I hope you are as excited as I am about the work that we're doing to make it easy for you to go from code to cloud as quickly as possible. We're right now in private preview, so sign up, aka.ms/azd sign up. And once you're enrolled, walk through our templates and give us your feedback. Try some of the conventions that we have in your own project and let us know. We'd love your thoughts. This is all going to be open source, so we'd love to hear from you and get you involved in understanding some of your needs and requirements as we build out this exciting new tool. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoy the rest of Build.